The most precious possession is life. Life is harmony, peace. This criteria is the only way of survival for humanity. Universal peace is to be created and manifested by every individual so that he may be an instrument in helping to prevent hatred, wars and disharmony. By doing so he will move further toward his final goal, which union is with the heavenly ones. There is no animal under the sky which, like man, would go against the laws of nature. But aren't mortals superior to the animals? The reason for Earth's natural catastrophes is because we reap what we sow. We have purposely abused Mother Earth's natural law and order by polluting the air, water and soil, the basic preconditions of life. Man has tried to create his own artificial world on top of what the Netarot has willfully made for us. Man is the only creation upon the planet with the power to reason and exercise free will. He was meant to add to positively, not subtract from harmony, negatively. Man uses his free will to destroy, to abuse, and to exploit, for selfish reasons. Man is meant to be in universal harmony with the natural order of things, which the Netarot has made. We reap what we sow, because whatever energy we put out, we will get the same in return, whether it be positive or negative. If we break the immutable laws of nature, we create discord. Evil is the works of man when law refuses by will to cooperate with nature's laws of balance and harmony. We as the ancient Egyptian order acknowledge the Netarot as one, so religion should be one, but they are not. In reality, the foundations of divine religion are one and the same nature worship. This is the oneness of divine revelations and teachings, but we have turned away from that foundation, unity, holding on to dogmatic forms and blind imitations called belief and faith. They profess their religious beliefs blindly, call it light when fires are light and darkness never blinded by anybody, without investigation, making unity, common sense and agreement impossible. When the rainy season comes, it doesn't exclude a Muslim's mosque and just miraculously pour on a Hindu's temple. The sun doesn't shine more on the Christian church and less on the satanic church. It is the small human mind that has introduced divisions. This is the real cause of enmity, hatred and bloodshed in the world. Religion and the my way is right, I have the only true and real God, he loves me and my kind, or my denomination only. Why have universal messengers, prophets, apostles appeared on earth? So you can recall what has been revealed, what one can do, prophet, all can do and accomplish. Universal messengers were here to unlock your heart's potential, that divine spark, and to give you the courage to leave the blinding light, material world. The Netarot sent down right knowledge of true way of life in the midst of pagan culture called monotheism. Unfortunately, the followers of these messengers, religions, make a distinction between the messengers of God. Christians claim Jesus as God incarnate, they consider Moses and the other prophets to be inferior to him, and regard Muhammad as an impostor. The Jews claim Moses as the only true revelation sent from Yahweh as they call him and consider Jesus to be a false Messiah. Muslims consider both Moses and Jesus to be valid prophets of their God, Allah, but they disregard their books and claim Muhammad's book, the Quran, as the only valid and useful book. The majority of Muslims reject Buddha and other founders of faiths. Muslims claim Muhammad is the last and best messenger of God, Allah, and the only prophet to follow. These are the toys of the evil, disagreeable force that blinds the mind. The world will never be in peace under these sad conditions. There will always be prejudices, murders and prejudgments upon others, until we realize the need for all the messengers of the Netarot present a reason according to the people's growth. The real spiritual man and woman must outgrow all limitations and become universal. We must have divine unity, since all the divine messengers came from the one true source. We shouldn't divide or separate the source. Each of these messengers at one time or another were mouthpieces of the nature on earth, teaching the truth of our deities, universal peace and harmony between their fellow brothers and love for the whole creation. They all say, there is one God who sends his chosen messengers to man according to their needs and overstandings in that particular time or era, for mortals always fall back in the blinding light and need to see the truths. I am here for you. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites, like and unlike are the same, opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree, extremes meet, all truths are but half-truths, all paradoxes may be reconciled. All twins come from a single seed. Both poles are in the same ground in all. There is no extreme. There is no end or beginning. You can't have a half-truth. It's the truth or not. The great fourth Egyptian doctrine, the doctrine of polarity, embodies the truth that all manifested things have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes. The old paradoxes, which have perplexed the mind of mortals, are explained by an understanding of this doctrine. Mortals have always recognized something akin to this doctrine, and has endeavored to express it by such sayings, maxims and aphorisms as the following: everything is and isn't, at the same time, all truths are but half-truths, every truth is half-false, there are two sides to everything, there is a reverse side to every shield, yet none of this is true. The Egyptian teachings are to the effect that the difference between things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, in nature, but different in degree, and that the universal reconciliation of opposites is effected by recognition of this doctrine of polarity. The teachers claim that illustrations of this doctrine may be had on every hand, and from an examination into the real nature of anything. They begin by showing that spirit and matter are but the two poles of the same thing, the intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration. They show that the all and the many are the same, the difference being merely a matter of degree of mental manifestation. Thus the law and laws are the two opposite poles of one thing. Likewise, doctrine and doctrines, infinite mind and finite minds. Then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the doctrine by showing that hot and cold are identical in nature, the differences being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold, and the highest hot. Between these two poles are many degrees of hot or cold, call them either and you are equally correct. The higher of 2 degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard, all is a matter of degree. There is no place on the thermometer where heat ceases and coldness begins. It is all a matter of higher or lower vibrations. The very terms high and low, which I am compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing, the terms are relative. So with east and west, travel around the world in an eastward direction, and you reach a point which is called west at your starting point, and you return from that westward point. Travel far enough north, and you will find yourself traveling south, or vice versa. Love and hate are poles of the same thing, with many degrees of emotions between them. The musical scale is the same, starting with C you move upward until you reach another C, and so on. The differences between the two ends of the board being the same, with many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of color is the same, higher and lower vibrations being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative, as well as noise and quiet, hard and soft follow the rule. Likewise, sharp and dull. Positive and negative are two poles of the same thing, with countless degrees between them. Good and bad are not absolute. We call one end of the scale good and the other bad, or one end good and the other evil, or God and the devil, jinn and angels, according to the use of the terms. A thing is less good than the thing higher in the scale, so you have your God is up in heaven and the devil is down in hell. Here's where the big white lie of trickery comes in. Think. Hell is full of fire and fire is light, so light on white is evil and the devil. Also think, and if God is up in the sky beyond the stars, then he is in darkness, so black and dark is good. The trick has been played on you. It's all the reverse. The light is evil, the dark is good. But that less good thing, in turn, is more good than the thing next below it, and so on, the more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. Up is dark, down is light, hell's fire. And so it is on the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as being things diametrically opposed to each other, entirely different, irreconcilable. But we apply the doctrine of polarity, we find that there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate, as distinguished from each other. The two are merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point of the scale we find more love, or less hate, as we ascend the scale, and more hate or less love as we descend, this being true no matter from what point, high or low, we may start. See the trick, love is up, hate is down. Love is dark, hate is light. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. So light dislikes dark, thus your racism is born. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposites exist everywhere. Where you find one thing you find its opposite, the two poles, integration will always happen. And it is this fact that enables the Egyptians to transmute one mental state into another, along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed, that is, may have their polarity changed, thus love never becomes east or west, or red or violet, but it may and often does turn into hate, where black began to hate itself and becomes a form of white, but never true white, black devils, and likewise hate may be transformed into love, by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear, and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft. Dull things become sharp. hot things become cold. And so on, the transmutation always being between things of the same kind of different degrees. Take the case of a fearful mortal. By raising their mental vibrations along the line of fear-courage, they can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness. And, likewise, the slothful mortal may change themselves into an active, energetic individual, simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. The student who is familiar with the processes by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings, may not readily understand the doctrine underlying many of these changes. When, however, the doctrine of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the matter is more readily understood. The change is not in the nature of a transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc., but heat may readily be transmuted into cold, simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way hate and love are mutually transmutable, so are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along which transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental states, as well as in the phenomena of the physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative, respectively. Thus love is positive to hate, courage to fear, activity to non-activity, etc., and it will also be noticed that even to those unfamiliar with the doctrine of vibration, the positive poles seem to be of a higher degree than the negative, and readily dominates it. So black dominates white, in all things given the chance. The tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole, blackness. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's own mental states by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence, in its manifold phases, shows us that the doctrine may be extended so as to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so much has been written and taught of late years. When it is understood that mental induction is possible, that is that mental states may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration, or polarization of a certain mental state, may be communicated to another person and their polarity in that class of mental states thus changed. It is along this doctrine that the results of many of the mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy and full of fear. A mental scientist bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction, the result being that the vibrations toward the positive end of the scale instead toward the negative, and his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. Knowledge of the existence of this great Egyptian doctrine will enable the student to better understand their own mental states, and those of other people. They will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing this, they will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will to change their mental states, instead of being their servant and slave. And by their knowledge they will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will to change their mental poles, and thus be master of their mental states, instead of being their servant and slave. And by their knowledge they will be able to aid their fellows intelligently, and by the appropriate methods change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with this doctrine of polarity, for a correct understanding of the same, will throw out the idea that light is good and dark is bad. We see now why the Egyptians wore white to funerals. Black as night means in the heart of God.